Ladies and gentlemen, let me use this opportunity once again to welcome one and all to the Lenny Robbins YouTube show. Know your politics. Let's come together to create a better understanding for each other by watching what our politicians do and what they say. I want to say something here. I really have to jump on this. This is very important, very, very important. And it dovetails to a lot of things that I've been saying over the years, which, people have been ridiculing me for and all sort of stuff. But some agree, some don't. But that's fine. On Monday the 20th of October, I read an article in the Gleaner titled, I saw this in fine print, stuck in poverty. And before I go on to the article itself, I must say to one Kimon Francis of the Gleaner Company, because I saw your name attached to the Gleaner, and I'm going to shoot you an email because it's I must say, job well done, Miss Francis. It's very, very, very critical and important, and a very good job to bring this report to the fore, even though it's in small, fine print and somewhere buried inside the Gleaner. It is, because I know I'm not the only one who have seen it, and I know I'm not the only one who have read it. I'm just going to speak my common sense two-piece about it. I will not get into the entirety of the article because it's speak to Caribbean and some aspect of global effect. As I said, the article is all about the global multi-dimensional poverty index. That's a measurement taken of poverty across the street. Across the world. But when we say multi-dimensional poverty means not only the lack of money, but not being able to access quality education, good education, or standard education, health, housing, transportation, electricity, clean water, good roads, all these things. Your basic standard of living, not having the ability to live a basic standard life. That's multi-dimensional poverty. You understand? When you can't, even jobs. You're in a job and you're not earning a living wage. That's part of the whole multidimensional package of poverty. That roll into this multidimensional understanding of poverty. And to that extent, makes you also not just poor or living in poverty, but vulnerable to this multidimensional poverty. The report stated that 2.8% of our population, which is 79,000 people in Jamaica, are trapped in multidimensional poverty. And I gave a brief explanation of what multidimensional policy is. Now, the report itself addresses the reality of Jamaicans enduring deprivation. You're depriving someone. We've been deprived and suffering, enduring deprivation in health, our education, and your basic standard of living, such as clean water, electricity, good roads, and all of these things. Basic. Even as our government boasts of a record low poverty rate of 8.2% in 2023, down from 16.7% in 2021. 2 years, they cut that poverty rate in half. Listen. The concept of multidimensional measurement of poverty provides a fuller picture of how poverty impacts people's lives by assessing overlapping disadvantages. And remember, when I do believe overlapping disadvantages is here is just the inability to access certain things, that the whole faceted thing that needs to come together to make you have a full life or live a life above the poverty margin or whatever, or live a reasonable life or have a good standard of living. Those are the overlapping disadvantage of how poverty impacts people's life by assessing overlapping disadvantages. You understand? Because when you don't have access to those, good job, good electricity, clean water, all of these things, and those are overlapping disadvantages for you, for people who are living in that level. The report also established that poverty is not a standalone socio-economic problem, but involves deficit in health, education, as I said, living standard, and other critical areas of your life that we mentioned. The report came from the United Nations Development Program and an Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative. Together, those two organization department put this report together. And for them it was titled Hardships, Poverty and Crime Hazard. Hardship, Poverty and Crime Hazard. Oxford and United Nations come together and make that documentation or that measurement or that research possible for us. The report goes on to reveal that an additional 142,000 Jamaicans are vulnerable to multidimensional poverty. Remember, I speak about the vulnerability of people falling into poverty. So when we talk about existential crisis in Jamaica, we need now to understand that our own existence is not about money alone. It's just not about money. Because there's a multidimensional approach to us being poor or not being poor. Because all the multidimensional factors that impacts whether or not we're living in poverty or we're vulnerable to poverty, if we're not accessing these things in a quality of life way, then we are vulnerable to multidimensional poverty. The report also goes on to indicate that 887 million people out of a 1.1 billion globally are directly exposed to climate hazard. Remember, we indicate and spoke about climate change earlier. Climate hazards such as extreme heat, flooding, drought, cold, and or air pollution. Now, I mentioned this before, that when we see places in Jamaica flooded that were never flooded before, or hasn't flooded for ages, for years, decades, we need to understand how impactful climate change is. As a people, we need to understand that we must have some care how we treat our environment around us. Because as much as we think it won't happen, what this article is saying to you, climate hazard can push you into poverty. And let us not kid ourselves. We of ourselves are contributing to the deterioration of our climate. We need to do that. I'm not sure of the existence of the extent to which the government of Jamaica is involved, but I do know they are big on climate change, but I don't know what is practically being done. Because like I said this last year, March, I spoke of a project that they had over, I think it's somewhere in St. Mary. National Water Commission, environmental people, a couple of agencies and non-NGOs members were there, where grounds were broken to plant 1,000 trees to create water catchment area. We haven't heard anything about it again. I still view it as a PR stunt. But irrespective, we the people have to make sure that we are aware of our environment and we don't exacerbate the impact of climate change and what the impact of climate change can have on our lives and our daily lives. We have to do whatever we can in any way we can to leave a more safer and better world for our children and grandchildren. The assertion in all of that is climate crisis is reshaping. The assertion from all of this that was just said is that climate crisis is reshaping global poverty. I just want this to sink into people for a while. Because sometimes we are in an environment and we say, boy, no matter what I do, I can't get out of this hand-to-mouth living and all of these things. But a lot of us is not looking at our environment. A lot of us is not seeking to think outside of the box. Because we believe making more money is everything to solving our problem. It's not. As it says here, the assertion is that climate crisis is reshaping global poverty. And you could end up with 40 billion in the account. I see some flooding that took place in Texas. And if we experience those kind of flooding in Jamaica, doesn't matter how much money you have in the bank, the bank itself will be flooded out too. So it doesn't matter how much money you have in the bank, don't think yourself untouchable by climate crisis. It's not. You are not. Again, midway through this, I must say, Miss Francis, this is a wonderful job you did bringing this article to publication. Wonderful, wonderful opportunity for us to, get a better grasp of our existential crisis in Jamaica. Now the question I ask is, how will and can our government respond to the findings coming out of this report? How can government and how will they respond to the findings coming out of the report, irrespective of what government is saying? What can we as a people do, and how can we assist in the reduction of multidimensional poverty? How much of this responsibility should be left to government? These are questions I'm throwing out there for us as a people to understand and ask ourselves, because if we're talking about our existence, and as this article indicate to us, the climate crisis is a very, very concerned danger to our existence. And if we're truly concerned about our existence, ladies and gentlemen, we need to really play a part, start to play a part, along with the government, to reduce the impact that climate changes or climate crisis is having on us individually, as families, as communities, that is pushing us to become victims of multidimensional poverty. That is pushing us to become vulnerable to multidimensional policy. There are things we can do. And as I said, we need as people to have a voice in what is happening in what is happening around us as far as our politics is concerned. We need to be able to have a voice so that we can advocate on behalf of ourselves in our respective communities wherever we are in Jamaica for the quality of life and the services we need in our community to make us not only safe or secure and secured, but also to improve the quality of life we live. We need to have a voice in that. We need to have a say in that. Now, this article also takes and jogged my memory back to a speech Miss Fable Williams, the Minister of Finance, gave in her budget speech earlier this year. And she stated that there are a number of jobs in Jamaica. A number of jobs open. A number of jobs available. So there are jobs for people in Jamaica. The Prime Minister later made an assessment of that in her campaign speech, that presently youths are being trained to fill those jobs. He never stated what year they have been trained in or what, but youths have been trained to fill those posts. And he also bragged that the employment rate in Jamaica was 3% at the time. Now, this report that I've just commented on is a 2025 report. And the United Nations and Oxford has no reason to lie to us or lie about us. Just to present the facts as they see it. Present the facts as it is. And this should be our eye-opening article or publication for all of us as Jamaicans. It's important, like I said, for us to really wake up out of our slumber, to begin to think ahead, to begin to not only see yourself as this two-tone individual. I'm a Jamaican and I'm a PNP, I'm a Jamaican, I'm a JLP. We need now to see ourselves as Jamaicans. The focus shouldn't be on I am a Jamaican and a PNP, or I am a Jamaican and a JLP. I am a Jamaican. But based on policy perspective and manifesto written and whatever the camp premises, I feel the JLP deserve my vote, or I feel that PNP deserve my vote. That's what I'm trying to get Jamaican to understand. Because this multidimensional poverty report that came out is indicative and is clearly telling us the underlying belly of our economy, of Jamaica's socio-economic conditions. Ladies and gentlemen, whether or not you want to accept this, whether or not you want to believe we are in an existential crisis. Welcome once again, Lenny Robbins' YouTube show. Know your politics. Let's come together to create a better understanding for all Jamaicans by watching what our politicians do and watch what they say. I've yet to hear anything from Fable Williams, the Prime Minister, Minister of Labour, about all those open vacancies were filled. We haven't heard anything about them. Let us keep an eye and watch what they do. Lenny Robbins YouTube channel. Over and out.